Hello everybody, it's finally here. Oh my goodness, I've been waiting for this review for so long. Ever since I started the channel months ago. Wow, it's been so long. The channel's been active since I think it was September. It was September, I think it was September 17th specifically. But, wow. Today we're finally there. We're finally, at the point where we can start talking about some of the really new and relevant movies in the MCU. Today's Wednesday. Happy Ash Wednesday for those of you who celebrate that. I don't really know what Ash Wednesday is. I apologize for my lack of knowledge. But to those who celebrate it, happy Ash Wednesday. But today we're finally here. One of my favorite movies of all time, really, but also of the MCU. I would have included it probably on my top 10 movies of all time, or movies that I appreciate, because some movies on there are not actually in my top 10. But this one's definitely top 10 movies of all time, top 5 MCU movies, and I'm so excited to talk about Spider-Man Homecoming. Spider-Man Homecoming was released in 2017. I don't have it written down, but I'm pretty sure it's 2010. It's almost definitely 2017. Here's a list of the writers. I had no idea this many writers was on it, but Jonathan Goldstein, John Francis Daly, John Watts, Christopher Ford, Chris McKenna, and Eric Summers were the writers, which is a lot of writers, and it was directed by John Watts. So a little bit of backstory and how much this movie means to me. So I grew up watching Spider-Man. Okay, I did. Spider-Man 1, 2, 3, Amazing Spider-Man 1, Amazing Spider-Man 2. I will eventually be posting an entire thought on my Spider-Man thoughts, but I'm not actually going to be doing a Spider-Man series by itself until December. I will give you exact dates here in a moment. But this movie in particular was so exciting for me because we got to see him come into the MCU for the first time, and this is something that I've been waiting for forever. We're likely to see a Spider-Man series starting, let's see, Spider-Man 2, 3... Oh, no, those are... Yeah, okay, yeah. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Starting on the December 12th, probably. I haven't figured out how I'm going to do December yet, because we have to do a Spider-Man series, a Matrix series, and a Sherlock Holmes series, as well as, preferably, a Christmas series. So it is difficult to see how I'm going to fit those in there. I haven't quite decided yet. I'll probably not decide till November, but... just saying, it's going to come. We're going to have an entire Spider-Man series leading up to the untitled Spider-Man 3 Homecoming sequel. So I'm so excited to talk about Spider-Man Homecoming. It's been one of my favorite movies of all time. When I was dating somebody that I didn't really like at the time, I mean, I liked them, I guess, at the time, but then they went away for a long time, and I was very depressed. And when I was depressed, I would watch the same movie over and over and over again. I watched Spider-Man Homecoming, I've seen Spider-Man Homecoming almost guaranteed at least over 100 times. At least. That's like ballpark, ballpark. It might be safe to say it's definitely the triple digits. I love this movie more than almost anything in the whole world. For those of you who don't know what Spider-Man Homecoming is about, it is not available as of the time that I'm filming this on Disney+. You'll have to... I think it's on Stars, though. I have it on DVD. But I don't really know for sure, but I'm pretty confident they will be on Disney+ at some point in the future. So look out for that if it isn't already by the time this video comes out. But Spider-Man Homecoming essentially is about this boy, Spider-Man, who we meet in Captain America Civil War. And he's a young teenage boy who's very smart, he's very sciencey. We don't know his origin story because we've already heard it too many times. But essentially you pick up where he is trying to wait for his new mission from Iron Man. He's waiting for Iron Man, and in that due time, he's hanging out with his buddy Ned. He's falling in love with Liz. He's getting bullied by Flash, and he's being ignored by Happy Hogan. His aunt doesn't quite understand him, and he's afraid that he can't give his true identity to his aunt because she might freak out. And all this time balancing high school and balancing being Spider-Man. Essentially what happens is he discovers that there is this... essentially, it's like a gun deal, but it's illegal guns and very, very dangerous guns, and they're being sold nearby. So Spider-Man goes to figure out what the problem is, what's the big deal. And he discovers, oh, it's a bad guy. There's a bad guy. And the Vulture comes down and takes him up. We learn that the Vulture has been building these guns out of the alien weapon, out of the alien stuff from the Avengers movie that dropped down into New York. So we learn all of that, and then we realize Spider-Man's like, hey, I gotta get a hold of Tony and like figure out how we're gonna stop this guy. And they're like, not really our problem. So he decides, well, if they're not going to do it, I'm going to do it myself. So they get into this big boat fight. It's really cool. And then, Iron Man's all like daddy issues. Like, you are not me. I want you to be better than me. You're not going to get the suit. Blah, 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 blah. And so Spider-Man's like, and then what happens from there is Spider-Man realizes he doesn't need a suit to fight crime. He goes to prom with his nice young lady, figures out who the Vulture is, and goes after them. He goes after Vulture without the suit. It's just him, and it's a web slinger. So it's really all he has. And he goes in, he realizes who he is, and he realizes, I don't need Spider-Man to be Peter Parker, because Peter Parker is Spider-Man. And he goes out there, and he takes down the Vulture and puts him behind bars. I'm really excited about this movie. I love this movie so much. I'm going to go right into the acting because it's already been 6 minutes, and there's a lot of acting to talk about. First of all, Tom Holland as Peter Parker Spider-Man. This is the first time we have seen a solid both Peter Parker and Spider-Man. I have said this forever, and I will always say this, that Tobey Maguire was a really good Peter Parker, but a really bad Spider-Man. Whereas Andrew Garfield was not a very good Peter Parker, but was a very good Spider-Man. And now we have both. Tom Holland's performance in this is great because we get to feel that he has, those father issues with Tony Stark, and we feel that he's struggling. He's struggling so much. And as somebody who was in high school when this came out, relatable, right? I'm just balancing, marching band, musical, choir, and all this stuff with high school and a job. And he's over here I'm Spider-Man, and I'm also supposed to get straight A's in school. And it's insane, and we get to see all this on Tom Holland's face and his body features. He's so good. I love Tom Holland. I've seen a few movies of his that weren't in this, particularly The Devil All the Time, which I have a review for on this channel. It was probably my favorite movie that I watched of 2020. I would recommend go watching the movie. It's on Netflix, and watching my review on this channel. But Tom Holland is fantastic in this part and all the parts. I love Tom Holland, and I'm very excited to see him in Spider-Man 3. Michael Keaton as Adrian Toomes, or the Vulture. Michael Keaton's always fantastic, but I think in particular for this, it was really, really good. He was able to be, a crazy old man without being a crazy old man. We understood that he was doing it for good reasons. He has a family, and family is always a good reason. It's basically a scapegoat for movies. It's we need him to want to do something, and they're family. Which is great, because when we don't have that family thing involved, then it's just evil for the sake of evil, which is never good. Spider-Man villains are better than most other Marvel villains, and this is no exception. I really enjoyed Adrian Toomes, and I really enjoyed Michael Keaton. I think he was a phenomenal choice, and of course, apparently he's signed on for Morbius, and he's probably signed on for Spider-Man 3, although we did not see him in Spider-Man 2, Far From Home, but I am really, really excited to see him again, at least in Morbius, because that really does mean that Morbius is technically connected to a Spider-Man universe. We don't know which one, but I am very thrilled to find out which one when that comes out. I think that one comes out in October, but I could be wrong. They keep pushing dates back on me, and my schedule's covered in red. I use red ink for all my stuff, so it's covered in red. I hope we can see him again because I do love Michael Keaton, and I do really like the Vulture, and particularly the way that it is performed here. Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark Iron Man. This is a different Iron Man than we're used to seeing. Normally we see the badass Iron Man, pardon my French, that is typically, he's cool, he's funny, he's relaxed, and he's just fighting bad guys. Here we see him as more of a father figure to Peter Parker. He's like, hey, I know you want to be a superhero, but maybe that's not what you have to do. You don't have to be a superhero to be a superhero, And I really liked his character in this, and I think it was probably the most character development we got out of Iron Man in any Iron Man movie. This is basically Iron Man 4, and I really enjoyed that we got to see that transition from the more relaxed, not very good at being a parent thing to being a parent, because also it's preparing him for having a child. Because it's no coincidence that Spider-Man Spider-Man Homecoming comes out right before Endgame. There's no coincidence, right? Because we have Homecoming, okay, And then we get to see, you know, in Infinity War where he's nervous, he dreams he had a kid, and that he probably dreamt that because he was thinking about Peter, and then has a kid in Endgame, and like he has to be a father now, and it's so lined up, and the fact that he was even, it's almost a coincidence, almost, and I really liked the character in here. Robert Downey Jr. is fantastic. We'll probably never see him as Iron Man again, but I hope we do. I know we're supposed to get something in Black Widow, but I am going to be honest with you, I am not necessarily. I'm not confident about that. I'm not confident it will be anything more than what we're used to. Marissa Tomei is May Parker. Marissa Tomei is in like every movie. I bet she's in most of the movies. Like in terms of how many people I've reviewed that aren't Leonardo DiCaprio or Steve Carell, Marissa Tomei is probably the one that pops up the most. Besides maybe Paul Rudd, because he's also in everything. Marissa Tomei is fantastic as May Parker. We get a younger May here than we're used to for other films, but I really enjoyed her portrayal because she's a cool aunt. You know, she's the aunt that's like, I'll let you do like marijuana, but you know, only do a little and make sure I know about it. Like she's that kind of person, and I really enjoyed her in this, and I liked her even more, I think, in Far From Home, even though I think she has less screen time there. But I am excited to discuss that when we get there, and I'm assuming we'll see more and more of her in the future, particularly now that she's engaged with Happy. And Jon Favreau plays Happy Hogan. Jon Favreau is fantastic. I love him. He is, of course, he kicked off the MCU. He directed Iron Man 1 and Iron Man 2, where he also played Happy in. And Happy now is basically, I forget exactly what he is labeled as, but he's, you know, in charge of basically securing everything, and I think it's security is what he's head of security, I think now. I don't remember. He's been a lot of jobs. But regardless, he's funny and he's hilarious, and he's basically in charge of Spider-Man. He's like supposed to tell Spider-Man when there's a bad guy, but there's never bad guys because Iron Man and the Avengers can just take care of it. So it's really fun to see this bounce off of Happy and Peter, and then, you know, in the end of the movie, there's a mutual respect there, right? We see that, you know, Peter's like, hey, I understand you're busy, and Happy's like, I understand that you're a really good superhero and I like you a lot. So it works really well, and then, of course, you know, in the next movie, we get that weird May and Happy thing, and it's cool because we understand that because of this movie, Happy has become more respected towards Spider-Man, Peter Parker, and that is why we can have such a cool, Happy Peter relationship in Far From Home. Zendaya as Michelle. I originally was a little concerned about this casting choice when I heard about the casting choice, but it is perfect. She does not seem Disney in this at all. She's great. She's basically MJ. It's kind of a cheap thing that we saw in this movie. In the end of the movie, she's like, "Oh, my friends call me MJ," and it's like, that kind of sucked because it's only Mary Jane. But I'm not gonna complain about it because I think she's fantastic, and I'm really excited to see more of her in the future. I loved her even more in Far From Home. It only gets better from here. Jacob Batalon is Ned. Probably the second favorite character in this movie besides Spider-Man, of course. Ned is fantastically funny. He's just the best friend. He's the guy in the chair. I don't like him as much, I think, in Far From Home, but if the twist that is coming, that he becomes Hobgoblin in the third movie, I am both really excited because that'd be really cool and also really upset because I love Ned, and I love how he is Peter's friend. I also have a third kind of rumor thought that I kind of discovered myself, that maybe we just see that Ned kind of becomes Venom, the Venom symbiote takes over Ned. That'd be kind of interesting, because then we can see Ned come back. If Ned is Hobgoblin, it's unlikely we're going to see him again as Ned, and I really like Ned, so I really don't want that to happen because I want more Ned. Laura Harrier as Liz. Liz is the love interest of the show, basically. Of course, the next movie we see that, you know, Peter Parker's moved on, and he's, you know, he likes Michelle, which is fine, but also felt a little too fast because he's so in love with Liz in this one. And of course, Liz moves because Liz is Adrian Toomes' daughter, so it's complicated. But the performance, just strictly performance-wise, fantastic. I really enjoyed watching Laura Harrier. I think she was good. I don't think she was as good as Zendaya, which I think might have been like on purpose, because we're supposed to like Zendaya a little bit more in this because she is the actual love interest of the series. And finally, Tony Revolari as Flash. I bring Flash up because Flash is the bully of Peter Parker, and he's really funny in these movies. In the other past movies, he hasn't been, a fun person that we like. He's always just kind of mean and a bully, whereas in this, he's mean, but he's also kind of funny and interesting to watch, which I think is equally as interesting as if he was a bully. But there's a rumor that he becomes a bad guy in the future, so there's a whole back and forth here of who could be a villain in the next couple of movies. But I really, really did enjoy him in this movie, and I hope we can see him again in the third one. He was in the second one, and he was fun to watch, but I think he might have been even more fun in this one. I was going to talk more and more about this, but I could probably talk about this for days. So I'm going to wrap it up here shortly. It's already been 15 minutes. If you guys do want me to talk more about any movie, or this movie in particular, but any movie at all, drop it down in the comments down below, and I can release another video. If for some reason you're like, hey, I don't have your full opinion on this, and I'd like to hear you talk more about it, please let me know, and I will film another one just for you. You might even get a shout out in the comments and in the video. But if you guys want a Spider-Man video just about all the Spider-Man movies that are already out, that is also something that I will grant to you upon request. So we can definitely do that at some point if you guys would prefer. But to wrap this up today, I'm gonna give this movie. I'm gonna give it an A+. I love this movie very much. If you guys haven't seen it yet, you really should. It's the best Spider-Man movie of all time, except maybe Far From Home. I think Homecoming is better just a little bit, but really not by much. Far From Home was also good. But this movie is really good, and of course, I love it very much. And that's going to do it for me today. Stay tuned this week. We have Free Held tomorrow and Watchmen on Friday. And then, of course, next week we are going to go back to doing DCEU on Monday, starting with Wonder Woman. So that's going to do it for me today. As always, keep watching movies and television, stay educated, and I'll see you guys in the next video.